أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين اللهم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي رب زدني علما رب يسر ولا تعسر وتمم بالخير ثم أما بعد والحمد لله. Respected brothers and sisters, welcome to another week, another lesson of our Islamic Studies series in which we are covering the 5 pillars of Islam, and we are now currently finishing off the chapter about Salah. And after having discussed the prayer of the traveler and the prayer of riding while you're riding on a transport or being on a transport or riding on an animal, etc., generally the rules of prayer pertaining to traveling and so on, we are now going to move on to the next section, which is the prayer of the sick person. And the prayer of the sick person is a small chapter in which we will be discussing the rules and regulations to when you are feeling unwell but you still need to pray, or to what level of illness does one need to continue to pray. It says, if it is difficult or impossible for a sick person to stand in the prayer, he may pray the obligatory fard prayers sitting down. So, if it is difficult or impossible for a sick person to stand in prayer, he or she may pray the obligatory prayer while sitting down. What does impossible mean? 319 will explain that because of, for example, intense pain associated with standing, or fear of worsening of one's illness, or delay of its healing due to standing. For example, someone's got a very bad leg injury, some sort of a knee injury, some sort of ankle injury. As with all legal dispensations related to fear, the fear must have a reasonable basis as opposed to a being of mere delusion, or as opposed to being a mere delusion. A reasonable basis may be the past experience, or a clear and obvious case, or the medical opinion of a skilled Muslim physician that is not an open sinner. So it's trying to say to us that how do you know that you can't? How do you know the illness will get worse? You know that the illness will get worse because of previous experience, perhaps, because you know that in previous occasions you've had a similar illness and you stood up and it became worse, or from experience, or from advice, or from medical opinion of a skilled Muslim doctor to say, you know what, don't stand, because if you stand, it will damage your knees more. If you stand, it will damage your ankle further, or it will delay its cure. So in such a situation where it's difficult for a person or impossible for a person to stand in prayer, they may indeed sit down and pray. But if you're sitting down, it does not negate, or it does not make it impossible for you to do ruku' and sujood, just because that's still an option. So it says, yet still bowing for ruku' by bending his head back, or by bending his head forward, if you like, and prostrating sujood normally on the ground, if normal prostration is also impossible. So ideally, what you should be doing is, if you must sit, then you may sit on the ground. If you can't sit on the ground, you may sit on a chair. And if you sit on a chair, then you must do ruku'. If you can't do ruku' because of whatever physical situation, then you may indicate with your neck by bending it forward to indicate the ruku'. Once you've done your ruku', you must in fact do sujood. If you cannot do sujood, then you can indeed indicate towards the sujood by, again, indication and prostration with the lowering of the head and lowering of the neck. So it says that yet still bowing by bending his head and prostrating sujood normally on the ground, and if normal prostration is also impossible or very difficult, then he prays by head movements, by bending his neck for each, making his head motion for each prostration lower than before. Meaning, if you're going to do ruku' up to here, then the sujood should be a bit lower to indicate that this is sujood and this is the ruku', and that's the difference. If sitting is impossible or very difficult, he may pray with head movements. You might be so much in pain that you can't even sit down. You're lying down in your bed. You're bed bound. So in such a situation, does that mean salah is no longer necessary? You're absolved from prayer? No, even if you're lying down in bed and you cannot get up, you cannot sit up, then even in that situation you must pray, because prayer you can't give it up unless for very specific circumstances. If sitting is impossible or very difficult, then he or she may pray with head movements while lying down, either on his back or on his side, with his face directed towards the Qibla. So you may be facing down on your back, and your head will be lifted up forward, facing towards the Qibla. Or you may be lying on your side, like that, but your head must be, again, facing the Qibla. So your facing of the Qibla will be by your head facing towards it. In this case, like this, when you're lying on your back, and if you're lying on your side, then like this, with your head facing towards the Qibla. Of course, right now I'm doing in the opposite direction because I'm facing you. If he or she is unable to perform the head movements, even that they are such a level of, for example, paralysis, may Allah protect us all, that they can't even move their head, then what do? Then he does not pray. If someone can't even move their head and can't make any indication, should they pray with their eyes like that? No, there's no such thing according to the school of law. Then you just don't pray if you can't even move your head. This is the interesting part. So if you are unable to even perform the salah even with head movements, such level of paralysis or whatever, inability to move, then in this state you do not pray. And if this state of being paralyzed such that you can't even move your head lasts for over a full day and night, for example, you're paralyzed for more than a day and night, then according to most of the scholars, you don't even have to make qadha for them, because it will be too much of a burden. In the sense that, for example, someone is paralyzed for 1 day, for 2 days, for 3 days, for 5 days, for years. Do you expect that when they are able to move, they should make up for all of their salawat? Would you expect that? We wouldn't expect that. Of course, I'm just asking you guys to engage you, but it's not really based on our opinion. The Sharia would not expect that. So therefore, because they are not even able to move their head, and salah is done with physical bodily movements, then they become absolved of that prayer, as in they don't need to pray that prayer as long as it's been for a day or more, a day and a night and more. If say, for example, they're only paralyzed for several hours between Asr and Maghrib, or between Dhuhr and Asr, for a number of hours in the day, not for a full day and night, then in such a situation they would have to do qada for those minimal salawat, maybe 2, 3 or 4 salawat. But if it's been a day and a night, then in that case they don't have to even make up for that day's prayer or for these days that they missed because of being paralyzed and not being able to pray with head movements even. Other scholars have maintained that, so with regards to having to make them up afterwards, there's a bit of a difference of opinion. If one loses consciousness or sanity for a duration of 5 obligatory prayers, then he must make them up upon recovery. If longer, he does not. So for example, if you fall unconscious, of course we know that you can't pray when you're unconscious. What if you're in consciousness or you faint, you're being in the state of unconsciousness, mentally unaware? If it lasts for up to 5 salawats, then you must make up those 5 salawat. However, if it's more than a day and a night, i.e. more than 5 salawat, then you don't have to make those up, because you are not at that time while you are missing, you are رُفِعَ الْقَلَمُ عَنْ ثَلَاثٍ, that you are not accountable because it's been such a long time for for that long period of time to make them up even. If someone wants to, out of option, out of for example ihtiyat and etc., as a form of devotion to Allah, then they may do so, of course, as a optional nafil replacement. So and the nafil would be, of course, in according to 2 rak'at. There's no such thing as a nafil of 3 rak'at. So do you understand that being sick, you still have to pray unless the sickness is extremely severe that you can't even move your head? So then that leads us on to the next discussion. Is there a time when someone doesn't have to pray at all? Can you become absolved of prayer? Can someone become not required to pray? If a sick person who is unable to perform the obligatory fasts and obligatory prayers by head movements dies, say for someone who's been so sick that they are so sick they can't even do head movements, so they couldn't fast and they couldn't pray as well, then they pass away. Or if a traveler dies on his journey in which he misses a fast, in either case, if someone dies before attaining the opportunity to do an alternative days to basically make up for it. If you, of course, say for example, you missed your fasting, or you missed the prayer because of unconsciousness, or because of not being able to move your head even, then what happens? Then it is not necessary for either one of them to have left a bequest in his will for expiatory fidya payments. Does that make sense? When do you pay fidya? When do you have to pay an expiatory payment? When do you have to pay a fine? You pay a fine when you did not do that which you're supposed to do, right? You pay a fine when you did not do that which you're supposed to do. For example, you pay a fine for parking in the wrong place because you did not do that which you're supposed to do, which is that you should have parked in the right place. You pay a fine for X, Y, and Z, right? Here, when someone missed the prayer because of not being able to move even, or being unconscious, and then they die after that, they are not required to make a payment from their inheritance. Why? Because they were not supposed to pray in the first place. Do you see? The wujub and the demand of prayer was not attached to them in the first place for them to then have to pay an expiatory kafara or a fidya payment. Fidya would have been required for someone who missed a fast or missed a fast or a salah, but they were able to. But because they were so unable to, so now with that information, or with that explanation, let me read that. If a sick person who was unable to perform the obligatory fast and obligatory prayers by head movements even, dies, or if a traveler dies on his journey and was not able to make up their fasts, in the sense that fast didn't become wajib upon them because they were fasting, because they were traveling, in either case, having died before attaining the unto alternative days, meaning you never had the chance, or you never had the opportunity to make up for it, or you never had to make up them in the first place because of sickness, you see, then it is not necessary for either one of them to have left a bequest in their will for expiatory fidya payments on behalf of those missed prayers or fasts. If the two, i.e. the sick person recovering or the traveler residing for at least 15 days, were unable to pray or fast, yet did not perform those make-ups before death, then the two must leave a bequest in their will for expiatory payments of half a sa', a kafara of wheat or a full sa' of barley, or its equivalent in cash for each missed obligatory prayer, even witr, and for each missed day of fasting, this money. Okay, let me say that, explain it to you now more. You guys ready? Okay. If someone was so ill that they could not even fast because of they can't even move their head, or pray because of their head movement, for that person, because they were not even required to pray, there is no kafara, right? Suppose now someone else, now they were traveling and they missed their fasting because of their traveling. They missed their fasting, but they died right after Ramadan. They died right on Eid day, they passed away. Day after Eid, they passed away. What does that mean? That means they never had a chance to even make those days up. Should that person who missed the fasting because of a legitimate reason, do they have to leave a bequest, a request on their will to say, please make sure you pray fidya because I missed 15 days or 14 days or 10 days? Why not? Because they were not supposed to. They never had the opportunity for it to become wajib upon them in the first place. Meaning they were exempt and then they died after an exemption. However, if say for example this guy was traveling, or this woman was traveling, after they finished their travel, then Ramadan finished, Eid day finished, and mashallah tabarakallah, they had like 15 days. And they died on the 15th or 16th day of Shawwal, right? Shawwal. That means they had a full opportunity to make up those fasts. Do you get it? But they didn't because they wanted to delay. They didn't because they were being lazy. They didn't because of whatever. But this didn't is by your own choice. So you had an opportunity to make it up. Then you decided not to use the opportunity. In such a situation, you have to leave a bequest. A person has to leave a request in their will to say, please make up payments. Pay for me on behalf of me. Fidya for these missed days of fasting or these missed salawat. Does that make sense to you guys, yeah? So what is missed payments? What is the payment? What is the amount? It's 2.2 kgs of wheat. It's about 5 to 6 pounds, I believe. How much is wheat? Actually, no. Based on inflation, it could be a lot more. So whatever is 2.2 kgs of wheat in your locality, in your community, wherever you are, that is the amount that you pay as your kafara for missing. You can pay the wheat itself, or you can pay its cash equivalent for missing salah, or missing a fast and then not making them up when you were supposed to have made it up. Do you understand, guys? Yeah. And that salah is even for witr. Do you understand? Even for witr. This money is to be taken out from a third of the estate before the division of the inheritance. If an heir of his or another third party, okay, I'm going to skip this part because again it's supposed to be beginner's class. But understand this much, that you're supposed to pray even when you're sick. But if you're so sick that you can't even move your head, then you don't have to pray. And if that situation lasts like you're paralyzed for more than a day or two, then you don't have to make those up. Unless you want to as an option. I want to end the lesson here for a reason today. I'm getting a call from my mom. I think it's a situation that I need to respond to. Okay, guys? Inshallah, we can wait for Isha or have a discussion or read some Quran, inshallah. These are blessed days of Muharram. Jazakumullah khairan, subhanakallah wa ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.